Does anyone remember a TV show called Years and Years? Chances are you do if you're watching this video, but for those unfamiliar, it was this weird yet chilling sci-fi drama written by Russell T Davies of Doctor Who fame and starring a few familiar British faces. It depicts a sort of populist takeover of the UK government, as seen through the eyes of an average British family, the Lyons family. Get it? 3 lions. And when you're watching, it almost feels like this could actually happen. It's kind of like a Black Mirror plot stretched out to 6 episodes, but with the heart of a Russell T Davies story. That is to say, the queer themes, but also the idea of family combining with found family, and this general sort of cozy catastrophe kind of vibe, like you used to get during his era of Doctor Who. But of course, like many Black Mirror episodes, it has the element of it being a cautionary tale. For the most part, this is not the kind of future we'd want to end up in, although the show seems convinced that this is the kind of future that we're going to end up in. It doesn't really function as a call to action to prevent this kind of disastrous future from ever occurring, but it does sort of serve as a stake in the ground for the writer to be able to point to and say that he totally saw it coming. Either way, its success as a cautionary tale largely depends on whether it relates in any meaningful way to the real world. And I think you can tell where I'm going with this. Years and Years came out in 2019, and after a few scenes set in the present day, there is a 5-year time skip to the then future year of 2024. That's this year. So how well does it compare? The most obvious signifier that this takes place in the future is that the family are always talking to these Alexa-type virtual assistants, but this isn't so much a prediction of the future, they have them in the present day as well. It's more of a way for characters to convey information to the viewer without having to have them tappity-tapping on screens the whole time. Which I applaud this from a writing perspective, because that doesn't normally translate well to fiction. But anyway, as the 5 years pass by in a montage, we see a number of predictions, including one in the 2022 section, where it turns out that the Queen has died. Strictly speaking, the chant of "Long live the King" is somewhat ambiguous. It could either be referring to the old Queen's death, or to the coronation of the new king, which happened the next year. So Russell kind of had 2 chances at guessing the correct year, but still, hats off to him for even that. No points, however, for predicting the death of Angela Merkel, who is regrettably still with us. Also in this montage, it seems we have developed the technology to make the year explode out of the fireworks, which is another neat little narrative device for the viewer. And although we don't have this yet in the real world, I'm not even sure how that would work with a firework. We did start doing these drone shows in the last 5 years, which look like magic and can do pretty much the same thing. So I'm actually going to give this prediction a passing grade. Virtual reality headsets make an appearance, the kind that you can wear while going about your day, and while those did technically become a mass-market product with the Apple Vision Pro, it's only really a thing for wealthy tech reviewers who have a few thousand to burn on an early adopter status symbol product that doesn't really work very well. And for some reason, they're all guys named Casey. It's not yet trickled down to the point where your brain-rotted teenage daughter can use them in lieu of headphones. And I'm skeptical that it ever will. Bear in mind that millennial parents seem to be a lot more cautious about the kind of tech they'll let their children use, having grown up themselves with a similar sort of thing. And before I forget, we also have the re-election of Donald Trump in 2020, which very much seems like the writer having a good old case of the TDS, but as it turns out, he wasn't wrong. He was just 4 years too early. Also, and this becomes plot relevant, there is a refugee crisis in Ukraine caused by a Russian invasion. Seriously, this is getting kind of spooky. To be fair, this could have been predicted on the basis of the 2014 invasion, but even so, that is quite something. The main difference is that in the show's version of events, the invasion happened with Ukraine's cooperation. And it turns out the Ukrainians are just as homophobic as the Russians, which, again, is kind of, as much as I hate to say it, is kind of true to life. Zelensky is not the LGBT QWERTY UIOP ally that you flag wavers seem to think he is. He will, however, fight for every last Ukrainian to remain separate from Russian control forever, even if he has to send every last Ukrainian to their deaths. Rather less plot relevant is this scene where Rosie hooks up with a man who has a robot. She later finds a funny-looking pipe in his bedside table, deduces that it's a sex toy and that it goes on the robot, then she outruns him in a wheelchair down a flight of stairs to get to the robot first to confirm that that is the case. Now, this is a not too serious scene that sort of fits with the milieu of this being in the future, where sometimes people have sex robots. But do people have sex robots in real life in 2024? I'm sure not much more than they did in 2019. The robot's main function in the show was to do housework and stuff, but the advancements in robotics that would make that kind of thing possible just haven't hit the market yet. The brain of the sex robot, however, has come on in leaps and bounds more than the show would dare to predict. And I don't think many people in 2019 would have guessed that large language models, the kind of tech that powers ChatGPT, would have got this good in the next 5 years. Or even that AI would get this good within their lifetimes. So, Years and Years was actually overly conservative in its predictions here. The robot in the show only spoke in simple sentences, whereas real-world perverts can have detailed cybersex with any AI language model that will have them. I make a serious point in all this, which is that it follows the general trend of automation. While a few decades ago it was generally predicted that machines would take over manual jobs first, fruit pickers, cleaners, and the like, the reality has been that sitting at the computer type jobs are the easiest targets for automation. If only I could get an AI to edit this video, I might get it out while it's still 2024. But you can get carried away with this line of thinking and come to the conclusion that it's possible for a computer to do everything that human minds can, even to the point of being able to simulate an entire human mind. And wouldn't you know it, the show has a take on this too. Now, my personal thoughts about mind uploading aside, that being that it will never be possible and should never be attempted. You will at best be creating a digital copy of yourself that only thinks it is you. Still, those thoughts aside, this show's interpretation of transhumanism is absolutely bananas. For one thing, it won't happen on anything like the kind of timescale the show says it will. And for another, transhumanism is not just an ideology in this world, it's an identity. People start identifying as transhuman, and yes, they even shorten it to trans. This is played for laughs when Bethany comes out to her parents as transhuman, and they tie themselves in all kinds of virtue-signaling knots because they think that word is short for something else. And for the sake of comedy, she conveniently does not use the unabbreviated form of the word, even somehow when Googling for it. This would imply that you don't even need to specify what type of trans you are talking about. It would just be immediately obvious to anyone under 40. And I can't help feeling that a certain group of people would have a little something to say about that if they existed. My explanation for this is that the trans genocide really happened in this show's universe. No one even remembers who they are, they're just gone. No one even remembers the word for it, just their entire existence has been erased. To be fair, 8 uninterrupted years of a Trump administration will do that. But on that note, the kind of person who uses this stupid cutesy voice and filter to talk to her, and bear in mind, I'm an open-minded guy, okay? There is a time and a place for all this ooh-woo stuff, but the kind of person who uses it while her parents are trying to have a serious conversation with her, and even apologizes in this way for that exact thing, belongs in an erstwhile site, and if you've seen the later episodes, you know what that means. But my main gripe remains with this hologram face mask thing is that the tech is way too advanced compared to everything else we see. As an aside, I really wish they'd put more care into the props used on this show because a lot of the consumer tech looks kind of outdated. A lot of people use old phones, which is maybe not outdated by 2019 standards, but definitely for 2024, which they really could have seen coming. Like, how easy would it have been to just CGI the camera notch off of this iPhone to make it look like a phone from the future? They CGI the whole front of the phone anyway, that's just how they do it. This is not what the actors see, so they really couldn't have just gone that little bit further. The laptop that we're staring at for most of this scene is a 2017 MacBook Air, which was already quite an old design in 2017. They changed it quite drastically the year after that. And while it's not out of the question that someone might still be using one in 2024, my dad was still using a 2017 MacBook Air until earlier this year, but you want your show to look like it's set in the future, and the cars on this series have the same problem. I didn't see a single 2020s vehicle in all 6 episodes. I know they can't just muster up a car from the future to use as a prop on a TV show, that's not what I'm asking. But they could have changed the license plates to make it look like a car from the future. Most people across the pond don't know this, but you can actually tell the age of a British car by looking at the license plate. The 2 numbers that you see are either the last 2 digits of the year it was made, or the last 2 digits plus 50. So 24 on a number plate would mean it was made in mid-2024, and 74 would either be the end of this year or the start of the next. And yes, it would be trivially easy for a props department to get the custom plates. They actually did this on an episode of Doctor Who that wasn't even set in the future. I don't know why, I'm guessing it must be some last-minute script changes, but hey, there were a lot of things wrong with that episode. Amongst everything, no one was autistic enough to bring up the car number plates, but hey, that's what you come to me for. Doctor Who review coming soon, I promise. But anyway, let's address the elephant in the room. In years and years, 2024 ends with Trump in his last week in office firing a nuke at China and everyone panicking. Which technically would have happened in 2025, but I can see why they did it this way for narrative flow. But first things first, if you genuinely believe that Trump would do this over seemingly a minor dispute, then you have no business predicting the future. What's more, if you think China wouldn't fire back, which they obviously can't since there has to be an episode 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, then you do not understand the modern world. It's this part alone that convinces me that the TDS is terminal and everything the show gets right, it does so by accident. Now, of course, Trump's last week in office hasn't happened yet. It's been pushed back to 2029, but I'm willing to risk being wrong about that because I obviously won't be. And before anyone brings up the January 6th riots, shut the fuck up about Jan 6th. Because if you genuinely believe Trump getting a few thousand rioters to dick around in the Capitol building and not really do anything,
while we're here, we might as well set up a government,
is equivalent to starting a nuclear war with China, which attacking them that way obviously would. And if you genuinely think those things are equivalent, then kindly crawl back into your mother's womb and start again, maybe? You can also do that if you don't subscribe to this channel. Because if you don't subscribe and hit the little bell button to be notified when I release new videos, are you even a person? I might just do a video about episode 2 next year, and so on until I get bored. I'd like to talk more about the message behind this show, as I do plan to take this channel in a more political direction. But as I said in my very first video, the content of this show speaks volumes about the man who currently writes for Doctor Who. Oh, and this doesn't really fit with anything else I'm saying, but there was this weird as fuck scene in the first episode where Ruby, no, not that one, is talking about her sex education class, and her dad is saying they get taught pornography from the age of 11.
It's official. It's compulsory. They need it.
And then Daniel, her gay uncle, says,
Compulsory
porn.
porn.
Ooh, I love
Love
it.
it.
And then Ruby, who is in her late teens, says, you're on the list. Category 15, middle-aged gay male, likely to mock boundaries and force sexual references into my orbit.
Congratulations, Dan. You're on the syllabus.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise you had an orbit.
It's just a totally normal conversation for a family to have. I don't know what you're talking about. It's the future. Get over yourself. But seriously, this kind of reads as a right-wing straw man of what a left-wing person would say, were it not for the fact that an actual left-wing person wrote this. But all this is to say that I don't want to give you the impression that I hated Years and Years. On the contrary, it was a wild ride. I'd recommend it if you're already paying for HBO Max. I don't know if I'd go as far as to suggest buying it on iTunes, but there is a lot to like about it. And as I say on this channel, love with one heart, hate with the other. Enjoy the rest of 2024, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
No, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up. No, I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.